Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome out to tonight's training webinar. This is our the weekly tax sale training with taxsalesupport.com. I'm Shade Frey. I'm here with Stephen Swenson.
Yeah, just want to welcome everyone out. Glad you're here with us tonight.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate everybody joining us every week. We try to cover different topics, and they're always related in one way or another to tax sales, to how they work. And so we end up talking about a lot of different things. If you have anything that you would like us to talk about specifically, let us know. You can do that in the question section or in the chat section, or you can always send us an email too if there's something specifically that you'd like us to cover, or you can also always ask us any questions at any time. We're always happy to take them. So for tonight, we were going to talk about a couple of different topics. So we'll be covering a lot of different stuff here. So if we cruise past anything that doesn't make sense, feel free to stop us. So a couple of things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a lot tonight about money. We're going to talk about money that we use to invest and some of the different sources that are available to us, and as well as things that maybe we don't even think about. We'll talk about tonight in terms of the capital we use. So for starters, why don't we start off with this? I think that, that when it comes to retirement accounts, they're pretty common. Although they are becoming less and less common, I think, as time goes on and as the economy changes. But right now, there are a massive number of people that have retirement accounts, or they have a variety of accounts. I mean, I guess you can really classify a lot of things as retirement accounts. We're going to talk specifically tonight about tax-advantaged retirement accounts, which is probably the true definition of a retirement account, one that you can grow tax deferred, so that you have the ability to grow it faster, and you have some tax benefits there. But there's obviously a lot of different types of accounts that we can use, and that we're going to talk about as well. So we'll get into to all of those. In terms of IRAs and 401K's, or if you've got a 403B, there are, I'm trying to think if there are any others.
Well, a few different ones, but
yeah, those are probably the most common. When it comes to any of these accounts, what's happened, I think, over the last, I don't know. I think that there was a time when investing in those accounts was a great way to invest.
Yeah.
I think there was a time, I think there have been times when you could have money just in your IRA or in your 401K, and it would do okay. But I think that time has ended. I think that more people than not end up losing a lot of money through those types of accounts, or they're not taking advantage of money that they could be doing a lot better with. I mean, really, you have to be making a couple percent plus, probably between 2 and 3% a year, just to keep up with inflation.
Yeah, really. I mean, if you're not making a 7, 8, 10% plus return, with your accounts, which most people aren't, then there's going to be a better way that you can do that through tax sale investing.
Yeah. In fact, you've got to make a good, healthy return, because I think what kills a lot of people is that the market may not perform well. They may have things that go down, but then they also get nickel and dimed by the companies that are holding their accounts, and those fees. There's nothing worse than these companies charging fees after they lose money. Which just seems crazy. It's like if they lose money, they shouldn't be able to do that. And so, about a little bit more, close to 40 years ago now, is when they originally passed the law. In fact, I wish I had written it down here. I had it on another slide, the entire term for it here. But it's essentially when IRAs began. Okay, that was when they started, and since then there have been several different laws that have been passed that have changed and reformed things somewhat, but that's essentially back about the time that they began. And the idea behind it was to create a way that people could begin to save for retirement in something other than Social Security. And the government wanted to offer, I think, incentives for people to do that, and tax deference was a good way to do that. And so people began setting up IRAs. But if you were to look at all of the different retirement accounts out there today, you would find that the vast majority are all doing pretty much the same things. In fact, you'll find that the vast majority of people that have these accounts are invested into securities in one way or another. You know, and so really what's happened with those, I think, is not a lot of performance. Also invested in the stock market in some cases, depending on the firm. That's what we wanted to talk about. This quote is kind of an interesting one that came out of the San Francisco Chronicle, but it's regarding what an IRA is allowed to invest in. And basically what they say here is the IRS code doesn't tell you what you can invest in. It tells you what you can't invest in. And really what the person's leading on to here is that there are a number of different investments that are all approved by the IRS that you could invest in using IRA funds. So in other words, lots of people have noticed their accounts have not performed well, and they're interested in other forms of real estate. You know, I mean, in other forms of investing. They're interested in maybe taking more control over their account. And so the question that we get sometimes is, you know, can I buy real estate with my current IRA? Okay, because the fact of the matter is, real estate has always been allowed in IRAs. In fact, there are many investments that are allowed with IRAs or 401Ks. That's actually not, it's not the IRS rules that dictate or determine what, I guess, what you can invest in here, so much as it is the custodians that, that are holding it at the time. You see, most likely, if you just have a standard IRA set up right now, you most likely can't go and invest in real estate. But it's not a limitation that is placed on the custodian. This is a limitation that the custodian has placed on what they want to invest in. Okay, and 97% of the custodians in the U.S. are basically invested into what they would consider to be traditional investments, which are securities. And basically, everybody's doing the same thing.
Yeah, and just one quick thing to point out is those custodians are going to be making money regardless if you make money or not. So, you know, the 97% of custodians that are only dealing with traditional investments, just like Shade said, they're essentially just mostly dealing with securities or possibly the stock market, but they're not using your funds to do anything other than just that. And they're going to be making their percentages or their commissions regardless of how much money you make. So of course it helps them for you to make more money, but they don't have the same investment like you or me would if we were looking at our own investments.
Yeah, nobody is ever going to care about your money as much as you will. And Steve makes a really good point that these people are getting paid either way. And if you think about it, when you have an overwhelming percentage of custodians, and by the way, you know, custodians are generally, I mean, there are certain things about custodians. They tend to be commercial banks and trusts. You know, they're able to meet certain IRS requirements. You know, they allow regulatory oversight and audits, things like that, that enable them to hold title to assets with IRAs. That's one of the rules that the IRS has when it comes to those accounts, is that you can't hold your own, you know, your own assets when it comes to an IRA. They require that that somebody that is somebody that's federally regulated hold the assets. And so that's one of the primary things that they're doing there, is acting as the one holding title. Okay. Now, custodians in general, there's a reason why 97% of them are all doing the same thing, and it's because it's the most profitable way for them to make money on on us. It's the most profitable way to make money on their clients.
It's the easiest too.
Yeah, it's definitely the easiest. It's most profitable for them, not for the client, not for the investor, because ultimately the investor just wants to make money. But when you have a big company like that, the decisions they make may not be based on what's best for the investor at all. It may be based on their own personal interests, that they have. And we're talking about we're talking about very wealthy banks and trusts that invest here, and
investing into a certain fund, possibly getting kickbacks or anything like that could help push them into a certain investment versus investment that's going to be better off for the client.
Yeah, another aspect of it is that it's very easy for them in terms of transactions, and I think that it says a lot about that industry that it's such a high percentage of 97%. When you consider the fact that securities were never were never the only thing that people were supposed to use their retirement accounts to purchase. It just ended up evolving that way because you have these custodians that basically wanted to sit there and make money on people. But outside of that, we'll talk about custodians again here in a minute. Basically, when it comes to IRA accounts, a lot of people decided, this was years back when they were started, that they wanted to invest into things outside of what those traditional investments would be. They were interested in non-traditional investments. And really, I think what changed was self-directed accounts. But when we say self-directed accounts, there are really different degrees of self-directed, in terms of, I guess, how we use that term. You see, there's actually no real difference between the accounts. They're both IRAs. The difference is with the custodians that they're placed with, and what the custodian allows, and basically what they're currently, what they're invested in. So when it comes to self-directed accounts, there's about 2.5 million of these accounts that are set up with a custodian, and the idea here is that these are custodians that allow for non-traditional investments, like things like real estate, and the custodian still goes through that process and checks the transaction, make sure that it conforms with IRS guidelines, which is great. It gives you added security. But the downside is that they are the ones that basically pay for properties, so you have to go through them in order to get it. It means you have to request money. It's going to add time to that whole process, which was a problem for a lot of people. A lot of people wanted their money faster than they could get through a custodian like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And one thing that's kind of nice is there is custodians out there that are specializing with real estate investors or specializing with tax lien deed investors, and so that makes it a little bit easier when you have a self-directed custodian that understands that time is the essence when we're talking about wiring funds to a county after purchasing a tax deed or something like that. Working with the right custodian, it helps that process along. Yeah.
In fact, as that problem came up and people started looking for faster solutions, basically what they found, sit right one here. What they found was that there were some options they had, okay? And checkbook control is something you'll hear about a lot of times when it comes to your retirement accounts. People talk about self-directed accounts. There's an industry centered around creating self-directed accounts. An industry that's there to make money. And I think like any other industry, there's good companies and there's companies that aren't as helpful. But checkbook control is something you'll hear a lot about sometimes, and basically what it is that they found was that for time-sensitive investments, it just didn't work to go through a standard custodian, because they have, really when it comes to certain investments, you've got to be able to move right away, and especially when it comes to investments like real estate. So what they found though was that legally they could create or start an LLC, and that it was basically went along. There was nothing prohibited in the actions there for the for your IRA to invest into that LLC or into it can actually be a corporation too. But essentially, what happens is that the IRA invests into that LLC, that corporation. The owner is able to create, or I guess open a bank account for the new business that they start when they start this LLC as a corporation. And so once funds are transferred, they basically have access to the funds. They have a checkbook where they basically what it means is that they can pay for stuff directly out of the account. So it gives them direct control over every aspect of their investment. And this, I think, is both a positive thing and it could also be a negative thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, once you get your checkbook control, you can't go out there and spend it on a big screen TV or a new outside pool or something. You know, this money has to be completely directed towards the business. And so I think that's part of the problem that's happened in the past. You know, I think that either through checkbook control, and there is some custodians that aren't doing full checkbook control but still set up an LLC and approve that are more mindful of what we need as tax sale investors. But you know, depending on your individual business and where you're located, you know, either one of these options could be possible.
Yeah. Now, having checkbook control is not necessarily, it's not a bad thing. What's bad is not having any kind of oversight or not having any checks or balances in place to prevent you from making a mistake, because there are certain prohibited transactions, and you wouldn't want to make a prohibited transaction because once you did that, basically they would fine you. It would end up costing you a lot on the account. And so there are benefits and drawbacks, but like Steve mentioned, it's an industry that has changed quite a bit. Over the last 10 years, it's changed quite a bit. And what's interesting is that tax sale investing has been changing as well right here at the same time, and they seem to be meeting up here at a good place, and I think we're finding a pretty good happy medium. You know, some of the, in fact, we're going to talk about some of the companies out there that will help you prevent from making prohibited transactions, but some of the things that are prohibited are things like collectibles, like you know, antiques, or if they allowed it with cars, that would be fantastic, but they don't. Life insurance policies are prohibited, stock in an S corporation, and then you could also say anything that benefits the IRA holder or immediate family, if they have some kind of direct benefit. In other words, you couldn't buy a vacation house if you were planning to use it ever. You could buy a vacation house, you know, you just couldn't be the one to use it. You couldn't, you know, you couldn't use it like it was your house. You'd have to treat it like an investment.
Yeah, you know, and that's one quick thing to mention. I mean, once you've set up one of these LLCs or companies, all of that property is going to be deposited back into the into that LLC, back into the self-directed account LLC. So essentially, all of the profit, you know, you're not going to be taking that profit and putting it into your pocket. You're going to be taking that profit and putting it right back into the LLC and into the self-directed account. And so, you know, with this retirement account, this is really what you're looking at this for, as building your retirement. And so, you know, some investors will do part of it in their self-directed account, and if they want to do regular real estate transactions where they're getting profit, then they'll use some of their funds outside of that account. It just kind of depends on the investor. If it's a tax lien investor that just wants tax liens, then maybe they just use all of it to purchase tax liens. So it just kind of depends.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to make, though, is the separation in title. You know, when they create that new business and the titling of things, you know, again, you can't hold, you know, you basically can't hold your own assets, and you will still be working with ultimately, you're still going to be working with a custodian, you know, that holds title to that will hold the title to the property. But as you set up this business, you basically can invest into so many other things. I mean, I started to look through all the different stuff that was approved, and it's crazy how much stuff you can actually do with your retirement account that is approved. I mean, the craziest thing I saw is you can actually borrow your brother, a sibling, money. And it was interesting. I guess apparently they think that that the IRS accidentally left out the siblings in the different family members that that can't benefit or you couldn't borrow to. For instance, you couldn't borrow money to your child or to your spouse, but yeah, apparently though with something like your brother, you could invest in businesses, if you want. You could even invest in some cases. You could even well, I guess depending on where you work, you might invest in your own business depending on your percentage of ownership and things like that. But basically, what I want to get across here is that there are lots of things that you could, that you can invest in using those types of funds. But the real estate's the one that makes the most sense, and it's certainly the safest vehicle that we're aware of when it comes to when it comes to long-term investments and understanding, knowing, basically how it works.
Yeah, an example would be, let's say that you had $30,000 in some self-directed account, or you had some 401K or IRA that you're not currently really using, still gaining money. You could turn that over to a self-directed account. And let's just say you purchased a $30,000 home. That home's going to go ahead and be issued in the LLC, and then you could bring in $1,200 a month. So every month you're bringing in the rent from that home, and it's going right back into your account.
So one of the questions here, it's a really good question, and it is, does the LLC own the self-directed account, or does the self-directed account own the LLC?
What is a self-directed account, isn't it?
Well, okay, so it's a little bit confusing, but essentially the self-directed account is investing into the business, and so the business though still basically stands as that separate entity though, and so I don't think you would say that the LLC, it doesn't necessarily the LLC doesn't own the IRA. Even though the funds have been put in there, basically the LLC set up as a business has simply been invested in by the IRA, if that makes sense. Which is, I think, why you could use either a corporation or an LLC, as long as it's an outside entity that you're basically investing into. Then I don't know if that actually helps. So the self-directed account isn't, when it comes to the LLC, at least from my understanding, and again, I've been reading through this stuff for a couple days we're interviewing different companies right now when it comes to IRS, the self-directed accounts, because we're trying to find the right ones. And they're not all the same. They offer different things, and so I've been pouring over the information here to basically try to understand some of the ins and outs of it, and we're getting a lot of good details down as we go. And in fact, we'll basically have a selection of companies that we've looked through here within a week or two, and with that, we should also understand and kind of know exactly what their fees are, and what the benefits, drawbacks are of using different companies, because there are. In fact, when it comes to the whole self-directed industry, we really have three different types of service providers overall. We have set-up organizations, we have custodians, which we kind of talked about already, and we've got self-directed retirement plan administrators, or you could just call them administrators if you wanted. So a couple things about each one of these. All right. First off, one thing we already know about custodians here is that they're oftentimes, banks or trusts, large trusts, and that they're federally regulated. They're the ones that are complying with whatever the requirements are in order to do it. They're the ones doing all the reporting and things like that. Now, the other two here are not those, but they'll end up working. Everybody has to work through a custodian because they're basically the ones that have the right to hold title. So, at the end of the line there's always a custodian, but there are different organizations and groups that work with custodians. And Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, yeah. And by the way, Jonathan, that's essentially how I see it. Is how you describe there in terms of the IRA investing into the business. Yeah, it's interesting. You can invest into all different types of businesses and startups. But you know what? When I think in reality, a lot of businesses fail. I don't know that I would necessarily try to do that with an IRA, just because of I know that a lot of them fail. But real estate is something I would count on certainly.
Yeah, well, you can use it for real estate. You can use it for tax liens. In fact, we can actually, work even with the secondary market with self-directed accounts as well. So, I mean, it really opens up the possibilities. It gives you the opportunity to, if you have funds in there, to fund your business, to fund really setting up this retirement account and building a retirement account, quite at an extreme rate. I mean, even just using the example of having just enough to buy a single-family home, but that single-family home is bringing in, $1,000 a month. Well, now you've got that account that's bringing in additional $12,000 a year.
Yeah.
Or if you have, let's say you have, $20,000 or $30,000 you'd like to invest into tax and certificates. Well, instead of making 1%, now you're making a double-digit return. You're making over 10% on all of your investments, and you've suddenly just, have 10 times the amount of return that you would in your traditional account.
Yeah. I think as you continue to pour those returns back into it, you're going to start to it's going to grow fast, and I think the tax deference on it is a really nice aspect of it that will save you a ton of money. So let's first talk about setup organizations, because they're out there. They're basically companies that create the legal framework. They're ones that will start an LLC for you. The right. They basically create the LLC and help get the framework set up. Now, they may provide some degree of ongoing support, but a lot of times not really. It's not necessarily what they do, so they're limited in the overall support that they can provide. So they basically put everything on the account owner, which I think can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who the account owner is. The positive side of that is that you have complete freedom, but you're also free to screw up and make mistakes. And so, really, I think that the wise owners from there put their own support team in place once they have it set up that way, so that so that there are checks and balances there, and they have people that are checking things that they're buying, or that are helping them with any kind of, basically they'll handle things outside of what they are experts in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when doing an organization, you're setting up an organization like this, you're taking a lot more of the responsibility. So it's on you to make sure that you're doing everything by the book.
Yeah, in fact, when it comes to checkbook control, there are a lot of companies that started off doing it and that ended up stopping doing it because it was causing problems. And I think what happened initially was this industry started up. This self-directed account industry kind of started up, and you got a whole bunch of companies out there that were suddenly trying to promote these accounts that were basically like setup organizations, a whole bunch of setup organizations, and they were helping people. Hey, for a flat fee, we're going to get things set up, and they would do everything, and they would get people set up. And then the next thing the account has a number of different prohibited transactions, you could say, and so that's changed somewhat over time. I think that what has happened since then has been, I think, a little bit of evolution of self-directed accounts and figuring out what works, and so. Yeah, we've already talked about the custodians. The one downside that the custodians have, I mean, they can give you added security because they're the ones writing the check. It's just slow. It's slow, and it makes it harder to invest. But there are, for those where time isn't as much of an issue, you can still use a standard custodian that allows real estate, and that would work great. but oftentimes, I think a better solution is to have, there are people that work with custodians that have relationships with custodians. And these are oftentimes administrators. There's different terms you could use for them. But they basically are people that will establish a relationship with a custodian that allows real estate. And the idea here with administrators is understanding that there needs to be additional help and support there, and I think recognizing that. So there are some administrators that will set up they'll basically help the client set up an LLC with the business, but they won't give the client complete checkbook control. I mean, still, basically what happens is that the party helping them basically here becomes the administrative manager of the retirement plan's assets, and the owner becomes the investment manager. So the owner is the one that will be selecting and locating the investments to buy the investments, and they still have checkbook control in a way because the administrator still has the ability to pay for something immediately, but it doesn't just go straight through the owner and that's it. There's basically a system in place to ensure that there are no mistakes made, which I think is probably a good way to do it. If you have some kind of a deal set up with somebody that's acting as kind of an administrative manager and look over the deals and to approve each transaction beforehand, that seems like a little bit better balance maybe than just going at it alone. But I could also see hiring your own professionals as well.
Yeah, yeah, and currently that's what we're, we have some companies that on the website that we've used in the past that our students have used, but really we're just trying to find the best options for our students, with each one of these different types of organizations or self-directed accounts.
Yeah, in fact, like I said, we're basically interviewing the companies right now, and it's different than it was 10 years ago because I think the roles of the companies are more defined now. And I remember in the beginning when we first started seeing the self-directed companies come out, I never knew exactly what the heck they were doing. I couldn't tell what their role in it was, because it didn't always make a lot of sense, and I think there was a lot of confusion at the time anyway over how things worked.
Well, there was also, when we first got started, there was a lot of companies that say they could do tax liens, but really when it came down to it, they took so long to get the funds or anything like that it made it hard to invest into those type of deals unless you were doing some type of over-the-counter or something like that. And so it made it more difficult. But there was also a lot of companies that have switched and focused a little bit more on real estate and tax liens and deeds and that type of investment. And so, really finding what the best company to work with, what the fees are, what type of support, like Shay talked about, we should have that information.
Well, when it comes to the non-traditional self-directed market, so that would be the 3%, is growing quickly when it comes to 3% of accounts that are focused on those other things, because the market is not getting any better for those types of accounts when it comes to securities. And not only that, but I think that we're poised for another type of economic collapse. And I think as those types of things happen more regularly, I think people will start to look for greater security in their investments, especially with things like their retirement funds. It's not enough just to have something that's safe either. It's got to grow and it's got to be worth something, and that's one of the it's one of the benefits that real estate always has. And so I think we're going to see that number continue to grow, and more people looking for other options. Some people just don't want to deal with anything with their retirement account, and this definitely isn't for them. These are for the people really that are more interested in trying to do something with it.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to build that retirement account. I mean, you can definitely get a higher return off your money by doing this, and than you could through a traditional route. So, I mean, even if you were to take the real estate aspect of it and how much flipping a real estate deal, you know, I mean, you have 30 in your grand in your account, and you flip a real estate deal, and let's say now you have 60 in your account, you've just increased that account by double within a year. There's not a way you can do that through traditional self-directed accounts.
Yeah.
I mean, through traditional, you know,
Yeah,
IRA
through securities
accounts or 401K or anything.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen, ever going to happen. But you have that thing that can happen very easily, doing it through real estate.
Yeah, yeah. So if for those here that that are interested or that want to switch over here within the next week to 2 weeks, basically by the time the event rolls around, I know we'll be ready then. But we should know which companies and really what we want to be able to do with people is line out exactly what each company offers, because really it's essentially what your options are between you know, working with you know, like a setup company and getting your own people to help you, which you know, may be a great way to go for a lot of people. For others, it may be better to go with something closer to an administrator that will do that. But we're going to get all the fees and everything figured out here for them, and also, you know, what we think the degree of support is that they're willing to provide. Which, you know, really, well, I guess really you want the support of somebody that knows this pretty well to go through it and look through it. But it seems like you'd be able to avoid, you know, the types of property or things that you couldn't buy easy enough.
Yeah, well, and any of these companies that we talk with or work with, you'll have the ability to call them up or set up an appointment with them and have them explain it all to you. I mean, they're going to be able to explain it better than me and Shade could. You know, because it's something we deal with, but it's something, you know, that companies deal with, essentially, you know, that we just push off towards another company or handle with it. So it's not something that, I guess what I'm saying is that these guys, this is their job. This is exactly what they know, and they'll be able to answer any of the questions that we don't have, you know, that we can't completely answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it's interesting, though. I think most people out there probably don't realize that real estate has always been allowed, you know, with their IRAs. You know, that was something that that was a revelation, you know, to me when I finally figured out exactly how everything worked. It made a lot of sense to me. But let's talk about other types of money as well here.
And that's OPM. You know, it's something that we probably don't talk about enough, but it's really something, you know, if you're doing traditional real estate investing, this is something that most investors are going to use. But really what OPM is just stands for other people's money. And kind of what makes tax sale investing different than a normal type of investment is usually you're going to need to have the cash on hand. You know, there's all types of real estate deals where they'll get funding through a traditional loan or through a mortgage or through something like that. But with tax sale investing, a lot of times you're going to need the funds. I mean, if you're investing into taxing certificates, you need to have those funds up front. But that doesn't mean that as investors, we should not use other people's money in our business. I mean, really using other people's money can increase our profits, and it's also going to lower the overall cost on a lot of the things that we can do. It can also increase your buying power. So, I mean, you know, and we'll go through and kind of explain how some of this works, but it's really something that as real estate investors, it's something that we want to use as much as we can so that we save our own money, so that we, you know, keep that cash. If you can use $20,000 for rehab work using other people's money and pay anything back before you really even have to pay on it, then that's going to be better than using your own cash. You know, keep that cash, you know, it's just best to use as much as possible. So we'll go through and talk about some of the different types of other people's money.
Yeah, I mean, really, you know, really, it can be so many different things. You know, just anything outside of the money that you directly have access to, you know, in your accounts, you know, anything outside of that. And so I think people generally have more access to money than they realize. But some of the things that Steve's saying, and that I just want to reiterate as well, is that you know, that is, I guess you could say it's a downside of tax sale investing. It depends on how you look at it, but the fact that the money has to be basically upfront. You know, that you have to have that money because so many different investments rely much more heavily upon OPM than does tax sale investing. You know, lots of other businesses rely completely on it, and I think what Steve is saying is when those, you know, when you have to pay for something up front like that, there's no way around that. But if you have additional fees or costs that are not the same type, like for instance, if you were fixing up a property that you bought at the tax sale, you know, you may have to pay for it directly with your capital for the property, but when it comes to the rehab and fixing it up, that's not something you would necessarily have to just pay cash for. That's something you could use something like a line of credit on and have it really not cost you anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good point. You know, and there's several different types of other people's money. We'll go through and talk about them through personal lines, business lines, hard money lending. But there's a lot of different options out there. So even with an investor that doesn't have any money, there's ways that they can go out there and do deals using other people's money.
Yeah. In fact, there are. That was one of the things I remember when Robert Allen. You know, Robert Allen's thing was all about no money down, and he was all about. Robert Allen is a real estate speaker.
Yeah,
kind of an older one now.
Yeah, it was a bestseller back in the '90s. In fact, me and Shade worked with him for a number of years before we started our own company. But yeah, his whole thing was no money down. In fact, that was his big book, No Money Down. But you know, the first line of credit is what we call a business line of credit. So once you've established a business, you can start building lines of credit. Now you can establish lines of credit through your local bank, but also another thing you can do is get credit cards as well. And so if you can get, you know, a low credit card with a low interest rate, then a lot of times you can use that money in your business along with your lines of credit. In fact, we're looking at a company right now, partnering with a company that can help our members build within $50,000 to $100,000 of business lines of credit. And this credit can be used to purchase property, to fix up property. It can be really used for anything within the investment. And so, you know, using that's just to increase the amount of money that you have that's available. You know, if you only have $10,000, but now suddenly you have an additional $100,000 to work with, you can see how much that could affect your business and affect your buying power and going out there and doing real estate deals. Yeah,
I think it can absolutely change and affect what might be accessible to you and what's not. I mean, the difference between trying to just use everything that's that you've got saved or in your pocket versus the power to be able to use lines of credit on things, I think will overall put you in a stronger position when it comes to buying it. You're not going to be basically draining everything you've got to you know, to get one deal done. You know, it enables you to spread it around a little bit.
Yeah, one thing to quickly add with those business lines of credit is they're not going to be secured. So, I mean, you'd never want this to happen, but let's say you spent $100,000, you took $100,000 worth of lines of credit, and you went and bought real estate with it, and then something happened and you weren't able to pay on those, you still keep the real estate. So, you know, really using these lines of credit can completely help fund a good portion of your business or fund all kinds of different deals that you may not had the ability to do before.
Yeah. Home equity lines of credit. This is something that if you've had for a home for a while, you may already have one. If not, it's a good idea to look into them. They tend to have well, basically the bank generally will loan you based on how much equity you've got in the property, and the rate that they charge is generally pretty low as well because it's a secure investment for the bank. You know, it's an easy one for them, and for a lot of people, it's easy access to money without them selling their home. Yeah, exactly. It gives them the ability to take out some equity, you know, so it could double or triple or quadruple their buying power. And like Shade mentioned, a lot of times they're going to have a lower than average interest rate. Like they may offer 0% for the first 2 years or some low percentage. Well, in that case, you can use that money almost, you know, free. With very little cost during that time to help fund your deals. I mean, we're not looking at using home equity line to go out and buy tax liens. That doesn't make any sense. But if you're looking at buying real estate, if you're looking at fixing a property, if you're looking to use that to
do some type of real estate deal, that can easily pay itself off pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Really, it's all about what it's costing you, to use it, and when the rates are low enough, it's well worth it. Personal lines of credit are another one that you can use, and again, I think the idea here is to increase your overall buying power. You can get increases in your well, oftentimes you can get increases in limits. You can sometimes get lower rates, I think, by talking to them. Often there's also a lot of incentive-based cards that are offering a lot of great deals. Like the cards that have a lot of credit cards will offer something in the first 2 years, or something for the first year, or some type of a deal that makes them really appealing. I mean, they're hoping somebody will get it and get deeply into debt there on it. But if you're paying it off on a regular basis, you can keep yourself out of any trouble.
No, definitely. I mean, a lot of people will scoff at using their credit cards, but you don't know how many success stories and successful businesses have started out by by financing their business using a personal credit card. I mean, you could get $10,000, $20,000 worth of credit cards and be able to use that to completely do a rehab deal, and within 3 or 6 months pay the complete amount off with only paying a minimum payment. If the interest rate's low enough, you're pretty much paying nothing. And so it gives you the ability to use other cash or cash you don't have to do real estate deals. And so even something like a credit card, if you have like Shade said, if you have a long-standing account, you can go in there and get your interest rate lowered. You can increase your limits. You're not going out there to use credit cards to buy consumer items. You're using this essentially to make money. You're just using as additional funds to help fund your business.
Yeah, let's see here.
Now this is one that can be huge for investors, especially tax-deed investors, and that's hard and private money. Hard money, private money. There is literally thousands of hard money lenders across the United States. I mean, if you could go today, you could find dozens of them within every state and city in the country. There's a ton of people out there that are willing to loan their money on real estate deals to investors.
In fact, it's a good way to go. It's important to remember about the skill that you're learning here and the ability to locate and evaluate tax sale property, because it's not a common skill. There aren't a huge percentage of people that know how to do it, and there are lots of hard money lenders out there that are, that's exactly what they're looking for to borrow and things like that.
Yeah, typically they're going to loan up to 70% of the after repair value, maybe a little bit higher, and their interest rates can vary, 6% to 15%. I've heard lower ones depending on the type of deal. But really, when we're looking at it, let's say you're doing a tax deed deal, you may look at 20 or 30% of that. And then even if you were to add some for fixing the property up, you're looking at 50 cents on the dollar, essentially. So you're going to have you can take these deals to hard money lenders, either within your own area where the property is located, and show them these different types of deal, and you're going to be able to find financing people that are willing to completely go in on these properties. And so, this can help an investor that already has money increase their buying power. Or for those investors that don't have any money, you work with a good private money lender and show them the type of deals that you can pick up. They're going to be more than willing to loan you money on those type of deals because they know that they're safe investment deals.
Yeah. In fact, one thing to keep in mind with when it comes to turning property around is that it takes some time. It takes a while to turn property around. When you buy property, essentially you have to know what your exit strategy is going to be, going into it, whether you're going to try to keep something, short term and sell it to another investor wholesale, and you can limit the amount of time that'll take. That's just a matter of how long it takes to make the transaction happen. But when it comes to wanting to sell a property for a good profit. You've got some choices to make. If you're not selling it wholesale, then the idea is that you want to flip it. You want to be able to turn around and make as much profit on it as you can. And that is going to involve most likely some things like repairs. There's going to be different things you need to repair on the property in order to get the maximum profitability out of it. That's also where you may look at what to do with the title on it, whether you want to pursue quiet title or not. That's something that will factor into that decision on the amount that you want to, basically the amount you want to sell it for. But it could easily, in situations, take you 6 months to try to fix up a property. It could take between 6 months and a year probably to fix up and sell some properties. And that's even if you're trying to hurry.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. But with each one of these deals, there's going to be different financing options out there that can help you do it.
Working with partners is also always a great idea. There are people that have more money than they have time, and there are people that have more time than they have money. And when it comes to working with a partner, I think you've got a number of advantages there, especially if you need the partner for something like capital. When it comes to working with a partner that has the capital, that's a perfect partnership, because you're able to provide real estate, they're able to provide property, and it's a deal that just makes sense. You also, when you have a partner, there's added scrutiny, to deals, I think, which will also help you prevent you from making mistakes. And there are a lot of places that you could go to look, for an investment partner. I mean, there are a lot of investors out there that are actively seeking partners right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And you're bringing the knowledge and the work. And so this is another way, if you're limited on funds but you want to get involved in the real estate side of it, or even if you want to do bigger type of deals, like you want to try to say there's some big commercial building coming up for sale or something like that. Working with these different type of apartment partners, they could, like Shane said, provide the financing for you, and essentially you do the work, and maybe it's a 50-50 split. But you can find these through investment clubs, through online groups. I mean, even just going on Facebook, let's say that you live in D.C., in Washington, D.C., and so you go online, you find a Washington, D.C. Facebook group. You can say, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I find properties for 10 to 50 cents on the dollar. I'm looking for a financial investor. You can put anything like that out there and find somebody to work with you.
Yeah, really just start networking with people, because a lot of it is about the people that It's about getting expertise from different places. Oftentimes you can work with people that have different expertise in things that can teach you a lot about real estate investing or different aspects of real estate. I think it's always a good idea to bring a partner on, and if you're in need of capital, then I think that's the perfect situation, because again, this is a skill that you're learning, and I think all it takes. I mean, there's so many good opportunities out there with this real estate, and if you think about the reaction that people tend to have, I don't know if you've ever shown somebody property before, but we've seen the reaction a million times when people see the types of property that are out there and the kinds of prices that you pay for tax deed properties. It's incredible to people that have never seen it before.
Yeah, I mean, this is a strategy we've even used ourselves, where we didn't have the capital and we worked with a partner and we're able to show them the type of opportunities there are. Also one thing, you mentioned it just briefly, the people that you know. Sometimes the people closest to us could possibly be a great partner, especially if you're able to give them a plan, give them an outline. Hey, here's where I'd like to invest these 3 counties in Florida. Here's what properties have been selling for. Here's some upcoming auctions. Here's what I think we can make. And if they have the capital, I mean, we kind of know who has money and who doesn't within our own relationships. You bring them these type of deals. A lot of times it can be a no-brainer. And that's going to give you the, I mean, even if you just did one deal and split the profits, now you've got cash to go out there and do a new deal.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, when it comes to approaching people, it's not like you're selling some kind of snake oil. You're offering real estate investments, and there are lots of people that I think are looking for the same thing. They're interested in the same thing, and this is definitely the cheapest way to do it. But really, I think in terms of just what OPM does, I think it extends your reach in a lot of ways. It makes it possible for you to get properties you wouldn't be able to get otherwise, or at all. When it comes to in some situations, if you're limited on capital, you could start up using OPM entirely, and still begin to make money with with tax liens or tax deeds.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with OPM, it's not something we're going to really use with tax lien investing a lot unless we got to the point where we had to do a foreclosure. But for tax deed investing, for real estate investing, it makes complete sense. In fact, even if you have the cash on hand, but you can pay nearly nothing by using other people's money, why not use other people's money and keep the cash just as a reserve? If you can use other people's money in a deal, use it any way you can, so that way you keep as much of your own capital or your cash on hand to either increase your buying power or just make sure that you have it to pay off when you need to. But there's lots of ways we can use OPM to really increase, just like you said. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is it increases your reach.
Yeah, and really how much you use it, is kind of depends on you. But you should always have access to some of it, and if you have access to some, increase it. Because again, I think it's about your reach, about your capability, and not only that, but I think that all of us tend to we automatically have kind of a negative. I think we have a negative view of OPM naturally, because we think credit cards, which I don't know anybody that really has any positive thoughts of credit cards. I just think when it comes to credit in general, it tends to be kind of a negative, and I think that for our purposes here, when you think like an investor, again, it's different from thinking like a consumer. And part of that is, like, for instance, using OPM to invest. The consumer is using OPM to get in debt. And I think the investor's mindset is to be able to use it as a tool, as a vehicle, to make money rather than just a way to spend it.
Yeah, I mean, most people, that's what they use OPM for a car, for a home, for even basic bills through credit cards or for whatever. They're not, that's using it as a consumer. But if you're using it to fund your business, to make money, that it only makes sense. It's only a smart business decision.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points, and we'll get some of the information posted here about some of the different companies. We'll get that stuff posted soon as well. If anybody has any specific interest in it here, we'll let you know on that. But outside of that, there are a ton of opportunities and things that are coming up. We're into the fall time here already, and so some of the tax sales have already happened through the summer, but there are still tax sales that begin in the fall, and now is also the time to start getting things ready if you want to begin investing when the sales start again in like March, because it happens pretty fast as far as when it comes up. Suddenly you're into the season.
Yeah, and there's actually quite a few good, really some of these holiday months, November, December, can be some of the best times to pick up great deals. And there is tons of auctions going on as well. I mean, I was just pulling up the list today, but Colorado, if you're looking for tax liens, they're going to be having all of their sales. And there's going to be a lot of good opportunities to invest as well. Also, if you want to maybe invest some money before the new year, there's going to be some pretty good opportunities. In fact, we still do have one more spot left to the boot camp. If anyone's interested, we have some people that they're interested, just haven't committed. So if you're interested, give us a call.
Yeah, it's still open as of now. So if anybody yeah, if anybody wants it, to let us know, and yeah, we'd be happy to see you there. We're really excited for that event coming up here soon.
Yeah.
So it should be fantastic.
The only other thing I think of is we might be doing a Facebook live type event coming up here where you guys can send us in our questions. We'll let you know more about it and send you an email. But we think we might try that and see, you know, just kind of like a question and answer or some different types of things. See how you guys, our members, enjoy that.
Yeah, we're going to try out some different platforms and things. So we'll be sure to send out emails notifying you guys anytime we're doing something so that you can be made aware of it and you don't miss out on it. So outside of that, we'll get the recordings up. And if you have any specific questions, please email it in to us. I'm surprised, but I actually have not received very many email questions lately. Less than normal. So I'd love to see that get back up to normal where I'm getting lots of the email questions here. I think for some reason, I think people started calling me instead of the emails, which emails sometimes work best. So if you have any questions, email those over to me and or Steve, and we'd love to get to those and help you. So.
Yep. Have a great week.
We'll see everybody later.